the Sarah case versus Nigeria, you look at it in that perspective of that's going to affect a smaller community. The oil spills in a given place, yes, but it continues. The effect continues.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this exciting episode of our podcast, Driving Eco-Sustainability, my perspective on this Saturday afternoon. I have the pleasure of being joined by Kagoya Maria, someone I studied with, an economist, a lawyer, someone who is passionate about matters to do with agro-ecology, and she's here to share with us food security and scarcity. Does environmental preservation play a role? It's going to be a very exciting episode. So thank you for being here with us. Welcome.
Thanks for hosting me, Grace. It has been a while and nice to meet you again after some good time. Today, I'm here with Grace and my name is Kagoya Maria Theresa. I'm a lawyer and I'm also a person very, very passionate and a defender of agroeconomical practices and a defender of agroecology and the food systems approach at large. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Okay. So tell us more about your work. How do you come to be passionate about this journey? What's your epiphany? What's that moment that made you feel like I'm supposed to do more? This is a cause that I'm picking interest in and I'm going to do more work within this space.
The journey started in 2021 when I joined the collaborative of the persons who are defending agroecology. It has organizations and other NGOs that really deal with agroecology and they work with smallholder farmers. Those smallholder farmers have complaints in regards to the bills they pay in regards of the pesticides. They have problems with the produce that comes out. Then even the issues that are happening within the health services, the health system, the public health. You look at people who come to the hospitals. I mean, it's not because they really need to be treated. It's because we need to change their perspective about food. We need to change the way we grow our own food at home. They don't need medicine. In this given time, some people do not need medicine. They need food, and food should be used as medicine. And that food, we can only have that food which can be used as medicine if we grow it ecologically. If we grow it like in a local manner, if we do not really apply the excess chemicals we use.
Okay. So yes, as our forefathers used to say, food is medicine. It's actually the best medicine out there that someone can use to treat ailments that they are having in their day-to-day lives. So the right to food. The right to food has existed time immemorial because rights are not given to us as written in all these instruments we come across, all laws and policies. So the right to food has been clearly highlighted in international instruments. We are talking about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We are talking about the International Covenant of Economic and Social Rights. So when we bring it back closer to home, how has the right to food been conceptualized within Ugandan law and policy? First of all, has it been conceptualized within our law? If so, how?
When you look at the right to food generally, in our Ugandan law, it's known as explicit, as you see the articles in the ISESA. In our Ugandan law, we are a bit skeptical about the right to food. Yet, when you look at the ISESA, it has an Article 11. When you look at Article 11, it says everyone has a right to food. Then it goes deep, zero tolerance to hunger. But in our law, it is not really as explicit as it is in other countries. When you look at Kenya, when you look at South Africa, because South Africa, even in schools, they provide for food. And in Kenya, they provide for food because their right is explicit. But in the Ugandan system, it's not explicit. We just look at Article 45. That's where we mostly derive our food law. Then when you look, we have also the objectives and the principles
So
for the Constitution.
More about Article 45. Coincidentally, I don't think most of our listeners out there actually have picked interest in this article, because most of us only pick interest in Article 21, equality, Article 28 of right to a fair hearing. So just tell us more how Article 45 plays a role in concretizing the right to food.
For Article 45, you look at it in the perspective of accepting, allowing, and us to utilize the ICESA, the other declaration, all the international instruments that provide for the right to food. When you look at Article 45, it gives us a wider perspective that enables us to approach the food system in the international angle, the way it is in the conventions. But when you look also our principles, when you look at Principle 20, 22, 23, and 21, they give us the perspective of us having a right to food. However, they're just applicable. Their applicability is the courts have not yet recognized it very fully, the applicability of the principles under our Constitution. But I think Article 45 is giving us a bigger perspective, given the COVID case, though the court was not very explicit about it. This was a case filed during the COVID time, where they were arguing that the failure of government to provide food at that given time was they were negating on their responsibilities to provide food to the people within the country, given that stage. However, court was said everyone has a right to food, as it's in the instrument. However, they went on and said the government had taken enough steps to provide food. When it came to the argument of providing places like the silages, the storage places, to encounter what happened during the COVID time, the court was very skeptical about it, meaning that shows that the right to food, we are not yet there.
Okay. Now, the right to food, clearly government has a role to play. Even day-to-day individuals with our day-to-day practices, we also have a role to play in the right to adequate food. So how does the right to food and a sustainable diet contribute to adequate living?
The right to food, when you break down the right to food has 4 components. The right to food has availability, accessibility, it has adequacy, and it has sustainability. When you look at all those, each individual in this country is supposed to play a role in those. We have the accessibility. Accessibility, it takes upon each and everyone to be able to have the funds, to have the resources, to access the food which is culturally acceptable to you, which is not only culturally acceptable to you, but the food that fits your needs. Then we are looking at the availability. We are looking at resources. You as a person, you are supposed to have the resources, like a garden where you can get food, the lake where you can fish. If you deal with hunting, if you deal with wild honey, there's supposed to be a forest for you to get that honey. So it's not all about the government, but you as a person. Do you have the land? If you do not have the land, is there a source where you can get that food from? It also goes back, we are looking at adequacy. Adequacy, is the food you're taking in for your dietary needs? When you are looking at a child, the child needs breast milk. Then we are looking at other people who do the casual labor, the porters on buildings. They need food that will give them that energy to work that way. So different persons need different food. That's the adequacy. Then we are looking at sustainability. Can we consume this food? Can we utilize the resources to produce for the production of food for now and the future? So when we are looking at that, then we are looking at the sustainable diets. Sustainable diets do engage in you having culturally acceptable food by the society. You are looking at someone having what they think is culturally acceptable to them. You are looking at someone having the food they need. So it's not all about the consumption of those food, but the production of that food, sustainable diet. We are looking at those, not only the culturally acceptable food, but that food should be for not just today, but continuously for the entire generation. And it helps us through those practices of those productions. They help in us acquiring the adequate living rights, whereby the adequate living rights include housing. Because when you produce food, you have to take it to the market. Then you get rent.
Yes.
The money you will pay for the rent. You get the money which you will pay for the education. All those education, rent, income, those are adequate living rights.
Okay. Now, I think what I picked out most, I think I'll stick to the last two. That's adequacy and sustainability. At the point of sustainability, this must be the basis of a sustainable development goal 2, zero hunger. Of course, as you have mentioned, these flowed from the international instruments. Now they have been picked out and concretized in the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, particularly Sustainable Development Goal 2, which the most important thing is for nations to achieve a zero hunger status. And we've noticed that in recent times, food insecurity has become a problem. People hardly have access to food. And this is affecting people's daily lives. I think recently, within the course of this week, I was able to see that children in a school in Oyam had to go back home because they were hungry. There was no food. And in the last 1 year, I would notice that there's been an increase in food insecurity. To be specific, at a rate of 9.2, as at 2022, we are looking at a rate of 9.2% of people who are in a state of chronic hunger. So, and one of the factors that has been fronted is uncertain climate condition. We are looking at people dealing with drought. We are looking at floods. So, in your view, to what extent does Uganda's vulnerability to climate change further intensify the food scarcity?
Food, when you look at it from the perspective of food insecurity, because the most affected areas where there is drought, where there are floods, take a look at Bududa, take a look at Karamoja.
Yes.
Those are the places without food. Those are places which have food insecurity. Yet, there is a lot of production.
Yes.
There is production elsewhere. But yes. When you look at the food systems approach, there is always production somewhere.
Yes.
But that production has to move to the places where there is no production. And when we are having those climatic changes, the drought, you will have those dry spells. Karamoja is an area which has faced very many dry spells. Karamoja is very rich. Karamoja has minerals. Karamoja has cobalt. Karamoja has gold. But how do we tap those resources that are in Karamoja, so that even if they have those drought spells, we can use the resources they have to make them access the food supplies in the different regions that have abundance. But we are not looking at Karamoja having those food spell. Like, we are not just looking at Karamoja giving them food just for the sake of giving them food.
Yes.
But we need to look at Karamoja having access to food that is culturally acceptable to them. You can't talk of taking matoke to Karamoja. We are looking at those people eating what is really acceptable to them. So most of the areas that have the floods, that have cut down trees, that have done whatever to the ecological system, we are looking at people draining swamps. Those people who drain swamps, in the next period, we shall hear of them seeking for help because there is food insecurity. There is lack of food in their places because those same swamps, they were once used for growing food, rice, yams.
Yes.
So that's the effect. That's the bridge that comes up, whereby you have the destruction of the ecological systems. You destroy the biodiversity. You destroy the plants. You destroy the forests, which forests have always contributed to the growth of your crops, leave alone like the pollination. You destroy a place that was helping you pollinate your plants. You keep on complaining of low harvest, yet you destroyed the forest that was helping you bring up that pollination because of the animals that were coming from that forest to help you pollinate. Then you're looking at destruction of and biodegradation of the swamps, which you used to use for planting yams, planting rice, and all those other crops. Then you complain of food insecurity. But however, the solution is the transfer of food from the places that grow large amounts, grow the bounty, then to the places that have the low lack or limited bounty, so that they can consume that. You make it available to them. So when you make it available, even the prices, they would not be very high. And leave alone, even at times, leave alone the transfer of it to those places. But we need to look at the storage.
Yes.
There are times when we have a lot and the season is on, then we sell cheaply. Let the government can come in at that given time and buy so that they supply to different places. Because at the end of last year, when last year was ending, a lot of schools broke off early, and the issue were prices of food were high, so they could not make up for those prices of food given the fees they had paid. So those are the critical times whereby the government is supposed to come in and sell to those schools that food, which they buy during the plenty, so that people who are farmers can also gain and be able to be motivated to plant, so that we balance the equation of food supply, given the drastic changes in the weather and drastic changes in the climate, because now we are beyond recovery unless we do something.
Okay, so as you have mentioned, you have mentioned that there is food is being grown in this country. In fact, Uganda is the food basket of East Africa. We literally take food to Kenya. But despite the fact that we are growing food, people are still hungry. So the question is not that in as much as we can plan to grow food abundantly, that's not going to be the solution to the food insecurity in the country. So, and also bearing in mind that still Uganda is still predominantly an agricultural economy. So at that point, how do we adopt sustainable agricultural practices? How do we incorporate agroecology within our agricultural practices so that we are not waiting to have food supply only within a particular season of the year? We wait and say maize is only returning at this season of the year because we are waiting on rain. Or matoke is returning in this season of the year because we are waiting on rain. Or it can only be gotten from this part of the country. How do we adopt agroecology to have a sustainable all year round food supply?
When you look at it in the perspective of agroecology is not all about it's not a big term. You look at it in the perspective of what practices we used to practice before we look into the chemicals, because there are those chemicals that are really toxic. But when you look, and when they go into the soil, they really affect the soil so much. Yet before, you could plant and use those practices when for example, mulching. When it rains, you mulch the place.
What is mulching? I haven't forgotten what mulching is.
It's all about getting the grass.
Yes.
You cut down grass, then you use it to cover the garden. That's the mulching bed. So that it retains that water. It helps your crops grow. So that during the dry spells, not too much water evaporates from the soil. Then when you look at it in the other perspective, there is something that is developing. I think it's mostly practiced now in Kenya, whereby they grow trees along food.
Agroforestry.
It's not agroforestry.
What is it?
I can't tell the term. I've forgotten the term, but you grow food alongside the forest. You grow trees, then you also grow food. But not those trees like the eucalyptus. You grow fruit trees because the fruit trees do not extract from the land like that, like the way eucalyptus tree would. And to do that also, you need some guidance. That's why while looking at these practices, we need advice. And the advice comes from the extension workers, who are even very few. So we need more of extension workers on ground to help us in those practices. And then we are looking at irrigation. We are not just looking at you wait for the next season. You wait when it rains. When it rains, I'll plant. No, you want to grow food, even if it's on a smaller scale, but continuously.
Yes.
You look also at the perspective of irrigation. You irrigate your crops, and so that irrigation, then followed by the mulching, it helps to retain that little water you've always used. And the fact that we are using agronomical practices, let's look at other practices that can help. We use not chemicals per se, but the materials around us. We are looking at other materials to cure those pests and to also to make our land more fertile, but not using the pesticides, all the chemicals, because those chemicals also, when you go deep, when you consume those tomatoes, you consume those cabbages with those chemicals. Partly, slowly, it comes back to you having reactivating those cancerous genes we already have in our systems, which are dormant, but they activate it. If you've seen the children currently, not all of the children, but there is statistics that most of the children who have gray hair, it's not because they are born with it or they are supposed to have it. It's because of the continuous consumption of things of food, which is from after spraying too many chemicals on it, then it's taken to the market, it's bought by us, we eat it with its chemicals, because in Uganda there is nowhere you can find that they test for those chemicals.
Okay.
Yes.
So, saying that you're so rich with knowledge in this space, I thought I would ask a question. How well equipped are communities with this information? Because out there, it feels like we just tell communities, adopt these crops, plant this. Maybe you can do indoor farming. It's becoming phenomenal these days. If you want your crops to last through and you get maximum yields, these are the pesticides you should use. But how well equipped are our communities? How is this information exchange and sharing working in our communities?
When you look at information per se, most people are not well equipped with the knowledge. When you go to downtown, someone will come from wherever they come from, go to downtown, buy the chemicals. That's Container Village. Buy the chemicals, the prescriptions are there, but they don't read them. Go without gloves, nothing of any sort, mix the chemicals. Then because they have their perspectives that if I use this, I use this, I use this, then they will mix different chemicals which also react. Then they will spray. They do not have any information in that regard. Then after the tomatoes, maybe cabbages have grown up, then harvest. Even if he has sprayed today, as long as he knows that he's supposed to harvest, then he will harvest the next day. Take to the market. You, the buyer, do not know where it has originated from. You do not know how he has grown it. You will say, that one looks good. I'll take it. So most farmers, by the way, do not know what is really going on. They do not know the effects. They do not know how their lives are in danger. They do not know how they are endangering Ugandans. They are very green about it. But what is necessary, it's not all about making those cries. It's all about how can we now help them. We are looking at the extension workers, because at the beginning of last year, the budget for last year, financial year for last year, there was a cut on the extension workers, which is not good. Because those extension workers are supposed to provide information. Given the number, they are already few. I think it's now better to increase their number so that they give that information to those communities. There is the current project of eradicating poverty. It has a provision for extension workers. But according to the research that was carried out, last year still, those extension workers are always 3 per district. So the numbers have to be increased so that they reach out to a bigger population and they teach a bigger population to avoid what is going on. Because very many Ugandans are going to start suffering from different ailments, but they do not know where they arise from. But yet it's because of that dangerous food they are eating. They are eating normal food, but that normal food is dangerous.
Okay. Now, at the point of budget cuts, as you have mentioned, the number of extension workers have been reduced in each district. That is in the name of funding. So, and of course, when funding is reduced somewhere, usually this funding is definitely taken to another sector which is treated as a priority. Now, in this country, one of the priority sectors is infrastructure development. We are having so many projects ongoing, constructing roads. Definitely, this is, of course, to improve service delivery. But in this infrastructure development, one key factor that always comes and is a constant is land. Now, under our constitution, we have a provision that says compulsory acquisition of land, among other factors, is subject to adequate compensation. And one of the reasons as to why land is acquired is to undertake infrastructure development. So, in your view, how can we ensure that in as much as we are undertaking infrastructure development, we do not interrupt our green ecosystems, which are the foundations for enhancing food security?
The infrastructure development per se is good. For any country, infrastructure development is the best way to go. However, we are looking at the ecosystems. We are looking at disruption of biodiversity. It's better to take the linear bit of it. If you know, there is a pipeline, it's supposed to move through the upstreams, the lower streams, and all the diverging areas that pour into Lake Victoria. Yes. We are looking at all those streams, all those small streams that pour into Lake Victoria. Then you inform the community that it's going to just pass down into that water. But that water is still pouring in Lake Victoria. And you are not looking at given the different patterns of people going to be affected. You feel it's negligible. At times, it's better to avoid something. It's better to always look for an alternative route where you feel it's going to affect the biodiversity. Because for example, for the ECOP, when you look at that ECOP pipeline, it passes through areas that are very pertinent to us, we, the Ugandans at large, and the fishing communities. But if let us look at always alternative routes. We are looking at these people who derive their sustainability from that biodiversity, from those lakes. But you're telling them it's going to pass through just a part of it or under the water. There will be no effect. What if you are not looking at the what if effect? The burst, the small, just one spill can run very many kilometers. Just one oil spill can run very many kilometers, which will not only affect fish, but it will affect their health. It will affect the water users. So we need to also always not look at the risk because it's affecting fewer individuals, because it's less risky. I think we need to look at alternative places, because the biodiversity and the ecological systems which we are doing away with it's going to come back and haunt our food systems. It's going to come back and haunt us at large. Like we are looking at South Sudan. South Sudan, they were not bothered if it was all about we need to get money. Yes. The extractions of oil started. Then after a lapse of time, the effects were seen by children falling sick, then pregnant women losing children. Then the water could not be consumed. Take a look at Nigeria, CERAC, the CERAC case versus Nigeria. When you look at it in that perspective of that's going to affect a smaller community. The oil spills in a given place, yes, but it continues. The effect continues. Then you feel like you need to cut down a forest because you need to construct a road. However, the effect of the drought that will come with a forest. When you look at the floods that come out after, it's because for you looked at the perspective of only the development. It will affect, the floods will not affect only the housing, but even when they come, it affects also the gardens, where people get that food, where everything happens. People use that food not only to satisfy their homes, but also It's the food that is supplied unto the people in the urban areas. So it's not all about looking at the infrastructure alone. It's all about looking at it in a broad manner, that it's not, in the coming years, we shall be affected. Because that's what we are experiencing now. Because of draining swamps around town, we are having the worst drainage system.
Okay, so we notice that we need to come up with better initiatives because hunger, food insecurity has been projected to be a problem that is going to actually increase. We are seated here. It's a very hot afternoon out there, and someone out there does not have what to eat.
True.
Every time it is hot, we are worried that someone out there is dealing with heat stress. Someone is going to be in an area and they literally cannot breathe. So what initiatives do you think that can be implemented to enhance food security? Of course, from the perspective of sustainability, what interventions do you think can be implemented to enhance food security? Or what interventions have been implemented so far and what more can we do?
For the interventions, I think it's all about going back to the grassroots. We are having a lot of funding in regards of research, of plant-resistant crops, and all that sort. But I think our research should leave the university area. And our research should go back to the smallholder farmers who feed 80% of the population of Uganda. Because the commercial farmers always grow food for export. But the smallholder farmers who supply food in these markets, where we always buy food, the high-income earners, the middle-income earners,
Yes.
and those, we need to go back to understand their perspective, to understand what has failed on their side, to also understand how we can help at a given time. Because those smallholder farmers feed us as a nation. Then we are looking at the plant-resistant. Yes, we are looking at the plant-resistant crops, but we are not giving them those plant-resistant crops. I think the government needs to invest more and provide the seed, not just providing the seeds around when they are demanded, but provide the seed at the beginning of the season, not to wait for the season when it's in the middle, then they provide the seeds. I think it's better they provide the seeds at the beginning of every season so that they help the smallholder farmers to grow food, which food it's going to feed the entire nation. And then we are looking at the cooperatives.
Yes.
It's better we look at, because I'm considering smallholder farmers because they feed us, we need to have them in cooperatives. Cooperatives that can help them look at the market. Cooperatives that can help them or teach them how to do the storage. Then cooperatives that can help them reach out to the people who can immediately buy their supply when it's in abundance. So I think that's where we can go.
Okay. Personally, from what I have observed, when you look at Netherlands has been one of the countries that even people travel from here to go to Netherlands to experience the sustainable agriculture system in Netherlands. And one of the initiatives they've adopted is greenhouse farming, where people farm within a contained space. And these greenhouse farms are being managed using renewable energy. And I think one of the few things that have been adopted here in Uganda, the last time I traveled to Karamoja sub-region, I experienced something very unique. They had been undertaking a project where they were training locals on how to grow mushrooms within a limited space. So what environmentally sustainable interventions can we implement to achieve the zero hunger status in Uganda under SDG 2? But first, before you answer that, do you think we as Uganda, where we stand right now, are we going to really be able to achieve the zero hunger status come 2030? And secondly, what environmental sustainable initiatives can be implemented by Uganda to enhance our achievement?
For zero hunger status, I think we are not yet there. There is need for more to be done by the Ugandans themselves and the government itself. I think the government is also trying to go back to the grassroots and providing what is necessary. And maybe it's working, maybe not. But I think we need to go back to the grassroots. For the climate changes, KCCA is doing some good thing. It's like greenhouse farming.
Yes.
But for them, it ends with seedlings.
Okay.
Then they sell those to the people who go there. However, I think for the environment, for the environmental impact, what can be done, it's the bit of by growing trees alongside food.
Okay.
That can help because it checks the environment. It will check that you have your food already and the trees growing alongside it. It will check those disasters that come with. Because the wind, the rains, the trees will help to break it down. We need to go back because these farms are already reclaimed. We cannot go back to that. Even the lakes, the rivers, they are all polluted with the dumping of the chemicals. So we cannot go back to that. But now what we can do now, I think, is growing trees wherever you can and whenever it's possible. Yeah.
I think actually there are so many drives in that space of planting trees. Last time I had a guest for him, Huntington. His main focus is planting bamboo. For them, it's to enhance use of household items, focusing on bamboo. But then the first guest I hosted, I think that's Naiga Doreen. She's the one who shared with me that there are quite a number of tree planting initiatives. I think you've also experienced them. There are so many tree planting initiatives. And one unique thing is that many of them, at least from what I've interfaced with, are also equally focusing on planting fruit trees so that people can, children really, mainly in schools, especially those in schools with limited means, and they have limited access to basic needs like food, planting fruit trees so that they can supplement on, the rainy days of hunger. So lastly, just what would be your ideal equation that balances environmental preservation and equally enhances food security?
My ideal equation would be for the people to adopt the food systems approach. The food systems approach, we are not looking at you just growing the food. We are looking at how do you grow the food. We are looking at the practices you're adopting to grow the food. So those practices will also counter the after effects of the environment and also maintain the security. The procedures, the processes you use while growing food will counter the after effects on the environmental system as it is. So I think it's better we adopt the food systems approach while doing things.
All right. Just one last question. Do you have some more work that you're looking at doing more within this space and more initiatives within this space that you could share with our listeners and guests?
For now, there is not a lot, but I think what needs to be done per now in Uganda, given what is being experienced in the neighboring countries, I think we need to have our own law on food, because our current law, the Food and Drugs Act, is very archaic. We need to have our own law on food so that it helps to provide food for the children in schools, and it will help to provide for how people can access food in times like the COVID times.
Yes.
Then it will also help us to regulate on the number of people, on the number of instances, like the Nakanyonyi cases where children in schools ate contaminated food.
Yes.
So I think we need our own food law, but it's already in the process. But it's taking some good time because it's of the funding and the approval.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, our listeners and our guests who have been with us. It has been a very exciting episode. For those who are interested in knowing more about what Kagoya Maria does, she is a lawyer and a very good one at that. Look her up on social media. She's active on Twitter. She's active on LinkedIn. She's also on Instagram. You will learn more about her work and what she does in this space. What's your name on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn?
At Mokama Maria.
Okay. So you can look more and find out what she does and her work in this space as someone who is knowledgeable in the space of the law, policy, and regulation and economics at the intersection of food security and scarcity within Uganda. So thank you so much. You've been good guests. Kindly look us up, listen, watch, rate, and review our episode. Thank you.